At precisely 7:48 this morning, Prince William issued a statement so direct, so uncompromising, that even those closest to the royal family momentarily stopped what they were doing. The future relationship between the Crown and the Duchess of Sussex has been conclusively determined. There will be no pathway for return. 19 words that didn't simply close a door, they sealed it permanently. The confirmation arrived without the usual diplomatic softening that typically cushions royal announcements. It came through Kensington Palace's official channel, bearing William's name directly, a rarity that immediately signaled the gravity of what was being said. Within seconds, the statement began its journey across the world, lighting up newsrooms, vibrating phones, and triggering a cascade of reactions that stretched from London to Los Angeles. What made this moment so profoundly different from every previous royal statement about the Sussexes was not just the finality of the language, it was who delivered it. William had remained strategically silent through years of controversy, allowing the institution to speak through carefully crafted palace bulletins. But today, he stepped forward personally. And when the future king speaks in his own voice about a matter this sensitive, the world understands immediately that something irreversible has occurred. The BBC interrupted its scheduled programming within 3 minutes. The anchor, a veteran royal correspondent who had covered the family for nearly 30 years, read the statement twice before looking directly into the camera and saying simply, "This is unprecedented." The Prince of Wales has just confirmed that Meghan will never return to the royal fold in any capacity. The weight of those words hung in the studio air like frost. Sky News pulled together an emergency panel. Analysts sat in stunned silence for a moment before one of them, a former palace press secretary, spoke what everyone was thinking. William doesn't speak unless the matter is beyond negotiation. This isn't a warning. This isn't a boundary. This is a verdict. Across the Atlantic, where the East Coast was just beginning to stir in the pre-dawn darkness, news alerts lit up millions of screens. CNN's breaking banner scrolled with stark simplicity. Prince William confirms no return for Meghan Markle. CBS described it as the most definitive royal statement in modern memory. And on social media, within 15 minutes of release, the confirmation had been shared more than 200,000 times. Outside Kensington Palace, journalists who had been stationed there for routine coverage found themselves suddenly at the center of a historic moment. One reporter, standing in the cold December morning air, described the scene to her camera crew. "You can feel it in the atmosphere here. This isn't speculation anymore. This isn't palace insiders suggesting possibilities. This is William, the future king, personally confirming that a former working royal will never be welcomed back. That has never happened before, not in this way." Inside the palace walls, senior staff moved through their duties with an almost eerie calm. They had known this confirmation was coming. They had helped draft the language, refine the tone, and prepare for the inevitable firestorm that would follow. But seeing it released, seeing William's name attached to words that would fundamentally alter the monarchy's relationship with one of its most controversial figures, brought a sobering clarity to the day. What struck many observers, particularly those who had covered the royal family through decades of scandal and reconciliation, was the absolute absence of any hedge language. Previous statements about the Sussexes had always included softening phrases like, "at this time," "currently," or "under present circumstances." This one contained none of that. It stated plainly that there would be no pathway for return, using a future tense that eliminated any possibility of reinterpretation or future negotiation. This was a boundary built not of temporary wood, but of cold, hard stone. For older viewers in Britain, especially those who remembered the tumultuous Diana years and the eventual reconciliations that followed various royal crises, William's confirmation felt almost shocking in its permanence. The monarchy had always left doors slightly ajar, always maintained the possibility that time and circumstance could heal what conflict had broken. But not today. Today, William had personally ensured that this particular door would remain closed, locked, and never reopened. This action was a definitive line drawn in the institutional sand, signaling that certain breaches of trust could never be mended. What exactly had pushed William to take this extraordinary step? What accumulation of pressures, provocations, and breaking points had finally reached a threshold that even the legendary patience of the palace machine could no longer absorb? The answer lies not in a single moment, but in months of escalating tension that culminated in a crisis of legitimacy. William's statement this morning was not an impulsive reaction. It was the ultimate strategic move born of necessary self-defense. To understand why William felt compelled to issue this confirmation, we must look back at the autumn months of 2024, when a series of escalating pressures converged. Throughout September and October, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had become increasingly troubled by a precise pattern she could no longer dismiss as coincidence. Every time she launched a major foundation initiative, every time she appeared at a significant public engagement, articles would surface within days, suggesting internal conflict, staff dissatisfaction, or personal struggles within her team. The articles never cited credible sources, relying instead on vague phrases like palace insiders or those close to the situation. Yet their timing was too precise to be accidental. This was strategic interference. During a private meeting at Kensington Palace, Catherine finally voiced her concern directly to William. "Someone is coordinating this," she said quietly, reviewing a timeline that showed multiple negative articles appearing within 48 hours of her major announcements over the previous 3 months. William had suspected as much for weeks, but hearing Catherine articulate it with such clarity hardened something inside him. His wife had spent years building a reputation grounded in service, dignity, and genuine commitment. Watching her work be consistently undermined by what appeared to be targeted media manipulation was no longer something he was willing to tolerate. While Catherine faced the calculated erosion of her public image, King Charles was battling his own mounting frustrations. Throughout October, he had received multiple, deeply concerning security briefings showing that Sussex-related media cycles were consuming a disproportionate amount of palace resources. Communications teams were spending hours each week responding to false narratives and correcting deliberately misleading leaks. Legal advisors were constantly reviewing potential defamation issues, while security teams were forced to assess heightened risks created by inflammatory social media content directed at working members of the family. The palace was not built to manage an endless cycle of self-inflicted internal conflict. It was built for governance and statecraft. Charles, the monarch, grew increasingly weary of the drain on institutional resources. Every hour spent managing a manufactured drama was an hour taken away from preparing for the Commonwealth Summit or engaging with pressing domestic issues. The cost was no longer just financial. It was a cost to the Crown's very ability to govern and maintain institutional stability. This constant media noise was functioning as an institutional stress test, and the monarchy was starting to fail. The pressure did not remain within the UK's borders. A crucial factor, largely unseen by the public, was the increasing frustration expressed by the Foreign Office. For months, the Foreign Office had received complaints and diplomatic inquiries from Commonwealth nations and international partners. The primary concern was the security ambiguity surrounding the Sussexes. Were they private citizens? Were they semi-royals? Were they representing the UK government, or merely themselves? This confusion was undermining the very clear, structured protocol that dictates how British royals conduct foreign affairs. The lack of clarity was becoming a diplomatic liability. Furthermore, the security briefings William received were particularly chilling. The intelligence was specific. The lack of clear institutional boundaries for Harry and Meghan was creating unnecessary risk, not just for them, but for every senior working royal. The principle of security is clarity and consistency. The constant uncertainty surrounding the couple, where they would be, who they were meeting, and whether they were officially representing the Crown, created massive operational headaches for police and security details. William was told in no uncertain terms that the ambiguity had to end, and that only a definitive institutional statement would solve the underlying security vulnerability. The culmination of these factors, the targeted attacks on Catherine, the king's mounting institutional frustration, the diplomatic pressure from the Foreign Office, and the undeniable security risk created an undeniable consensus. The moment for mere dialogue had passed. The crown was no longer dealing with a family rift. It was managing an existential institutional threat. For William, the decision became crystal clear. Protecting the stability of the monarchy and the safety of his family, especially Catherine and his children, outweighed any lingering hope of reconciliation. The converging pressures of coordinated attacks on Catherine, the draining of the crown's institutional resources, and the diplomatic liability posed by the Sussexes' ambiguous status demanded more than just a family discussion. It required a full institutional summit, an emergency session where the crown's most trusted advisors and senior royals convened to forge a definitive path forward. The resulting strategy rested on 4 crucial pillars of decision, each representing a different facet of the monarchy's authority. The first crucial input came from Princess Anne. As the most respected and unwavering figure of duty within the family, her counsel carried immense moral weight. Anne's advice was characteristically direct. The institution must clearly define its boundaries. Her message to William was precise. The blurring must end. She argued that the monarchy could tolerate personal estrangement, but it could not survive institutional ambiguity. She urged William to establish formal, public boundaries that left no room for doubt or future negotiation. Her support was vital in giving William the institutional courage to take the final, uncompromising step. The second decisive factor came from the legal team. The palace's legal experts had been constantly battling the gray area of defamation and intellectual property. Their conclusion was grim. The continuous stream of leaks, accusations, and self-serving narratives posed a long-term legal risk. They advised William that the only way to mitigate this risk was to formally sever all institutional ties, thereby legally classifying the Sussexes as entirely private citizens. This would allow the palace to handle future attacks as purely civil matters, rather than confusing them with official royal business. The legal advice was clear. Institutional safety demanded a clean break. The third pillar of support originated from the Foreign Office. As previously established, the diplomatic confusion was becoming critical. The Foreign Office delivered a stark ultimatum. For the sake of international protocol and the smooth operation of foreign policy, the status of Harry and Meghan had to be resolved immediately. There could be no more ambiguity about whether the couple was speaking on behalf of the Crown. The Foreign Office stressed that William needed to issue a statement that would satisfy international allies that the royal family was a stable, predictable partner in global diplomacy. The final decision rested with Prince William himself. Weighing the counsel from Anne, the legal advice, and the diplomatic imperative, William recognized that the crisis was no longer about personal feelings. It was about the survival of the Crown's operational stability. He concluded that his duty as the future king superseded any personal desire for a quiet reconciliation with his brother. The moment demanded strength, clarity, and an iron will. William took all 4 pillars of advice and consolidated them into one final, uncompromising directive. The statement confirming the permanent, irreversible exclusion of Meghan Markle from any working role in the royal family would be issued. The decision was cast in stone, but the execution demanded strategic precision at the highest level. A statement this historic and permanent could not be marred by ambiguity or procedural error. Consequently, an emergency summit was covertly convened away from Kensington Palace to ensure absolute discretion. This pivotal meeting included King Charles, Prince William, Princess Anne, the head of the Foreign Office, William's private secretary, and the Crown's most senior legal counsel. The sole objective of this summit was to finalize the language of the statement. The legal counsel presented 3 drafts. The first was a softer version, using neutral language about a change of circumstances. The second was more technical, focusing on the redefinition of responsibilities. But it was William himself who rejected both. He insisted that only absolute finality could permanently dismantle the cycle of toxic news and diplomatic uncertainty. He was done with half measures. The institution needed a clean, definitive break. Princess Anne was in stark agreement, and it was she who championed the ultimately decisive phrase, "No pathway for return." She argued that the wording was institutional, not personal, emphasizing that the palace had considered the matter and concluded that a return was no longer a viable structural option. Once William assented, the 19-word conclusion was locked in. This was not just a message to the public. It was an internal directive. The matter was settled, and further discussion was closed. With the language secured, the focus shifted to the global release strategy. Media advisors faced a dual challenge: how to ensure the news was received as a conclusive institutional statement rather than a personal attack. They decided on the 7:48 a.m. London release time, early enough to capture the major UK and European morning news programs, but late enough to break as headline news on US East Coast media outlets in their late-night and early morning coverage. This precise timing was designed to maximize the shockwave, ensuring the story could not be buried by any other global event. Critically, they decided to attach only William's name to the statement. This was a calculated strategic necessity. King Charles, as the head of state, needed to maintain a degree of diplomatic distance to uphold his position of supreme neutrality. William, however, as the Prince of Wales and future guardian of the institution, had the right and the responsibility to deliver this decisive action. William's involvement positioned the move as an act of future leadership, a man protecting the stability and future of the crown, not just a family member settling a private feud. As the emergency summit concluded, there was a solemn understanding that a new chapter of royal history had been written. Patience had run out. Diplomacy had failed. And William, the man known for his restraint, had personally executed a bold, irreversible political act to protect the institution he is destined to inherit. The countdown to 7:48 a.m. began. The immediate fallout from William's definitive 19-word statement revealed a profound psychological divide in how the news was processed across the Atlantic. In the United Kingdom, the news was received with a somber, institutional acceptance. The British media, largely accustomed to the monarchy's strict adherence to protocol and long-term stability, interpreted the statement as a necessary, if tragic, act of institutional hygiene. The narrative focused not on the cruelty of the exclusion, but on the relief that the ambiguity had finally ended. Newspaper editorials in London were quick to praise William's resolve, framing the decision as a defense of the crown against persistent, destabilizing external influence. They emphasized that a permanent, non-negotiable boundary was the only way to safeguard King Charles's fragile reign and ensure the smooth transition of power to William. The prevailing tone was one of regretful finality. A door was sealed, but for the greater good of the monarchy itself. The American reaction, however, was fundamentally different. In the U.S., the news was processed through the lens of personal narrative and emotional conflict. The media framed the statement not as a strategic institutional decision, but as a cold, calculated act of family rejection. For many U.S. commentators, particularly those focused on celebrity culture and victim narratives, William was painted as the rigid, cold-hearted antagonist, delivering a verdict of exile. The difference in coverage highlighted the core misunderstanding between the two nations regarding the monarchy. Britain saw William as the future sovereign, fulfilling his constitutional duty. America often saw him as the older brother, delivering a cruel blow to his younger sibling and his wife. U.S. morning shows debated whether the statement was justified institutional protection or simply a vindictive familial shutdown. Social media in the U.S. erupted, generating massive engagement with strong support for and condemnation of both sides, a true reflection of the narrative warfare the palace sought to end. The psychological power of William's statement lay in its cold certainty. In a world defined by political hedging and PR spin, William's refusal to use any hedge language like "at this time" or "currently" was its most devastating weapon. This lack of ambiguity stripped the Sussex narrative of its most crucial element, the hope of eventual reconciliation. By declaring the path permanently closed, William eliminated the possibility of future negotiations or a sentimental return during a moment of national crisis. He removed their political leverage entirely. This definitive finality was, institutionally speaking, a brilliant political move. It forced the world to finally acknowledge the irreversible truth. The Sussex chapter of the working royal family's history is over, and the time for speculation about a return is finished. The Crown had spoken, not through lawyers, but through the voice of the man next in line to the throne. The release of William's definitive statement triggered immediate and profound consequences, not least of which was the deafening silence from the Sussex camp. For a couple that has historically utilized media, whether through strategically timed leaks, explosive interviews, or published memoirs to control their narrative, their complete silence in the hours following William's 7:48 a.m. pronouncement was a critical tell. It suggested they had been taken completely by surprise, or perhaps more accurately, that the finality of the statement had robbed them of their primary weapon, the power to negotiate and exploit institutional ambiguity. The palace's strategic timing achieved its intended psychological effect. By issuing the statement early in the British morning, William ensured the news would dominate the entire 24-hour cycle before the Sussexes in California could effectively coordinate a response. Any attempt by Harry or Meghan to issue a rebuttal hours later would appear defensive, reactive, and ultimately futile against the immovable object of the future king's word. This was institutional control exerted not through force, but through superior communication strategy. This decision also had profound legal and financial implications for the couple. By formally stating no pathway for return, William had publicly formalized the boundary that the legal team had long sought. The Sussexes were now irrefutably private citizens, with no institutional support or protection. This classification directly impacts their ability to use their former royal titles for commercial gain in certain markets, and significantly increases their vulnerability to future legal challenges regarding defamation or the use of private information that falls outside the purview of Crown immunity. For the public, the clarity offered a strange form of psychological relief. For years, the royal rift had been a source of constant, grating noise, a perpetual drama draining the attention from the monarchy's actual work. William's statement acted like a decisive cut, ending the speculation and forcing everyone to accept the new reality. It eliminated the possibility of sentimental narratives about healing or forgiveness being played out in the media, effectively demanding that the public focus return to the stable, working core of the monarchy, King Charles and William and Catherine. The statement also served as a clear message to the international community. The diplomatic ambiguity that had troubled the Foreign Office was instantly resolved. Any foreign government or organization now engaging with the Sussexes does so with the unequivocal knowledge that the couple holds no authority, represents no official capacity, and speaks only for themselves. This clarity was essential in restoring the predictability that diplomatic partners require from the British monarchy. The statement issued by Prince William at 7:48 a.m. was far more than a familial or PR maneuver. It was a profound, non-verbal declaration of his ascension as the definitive institutional leader of the monarchy's future. In this single act of cold certainty, William demonstrated the kind of political steel that King Charles, burdened by decades of historical compromise and diplomacy, has often been unable to fully project. By attaching his name to the 19 words, William effectively redefined his leadership style. He signaled that his reign will be characterized by a zero-tolerance policy for existential threats to the Crown's stability. Where Queen Elizabeth II famously preferred to let issues resolve through time and silence, William has shown he is willing to surgically remove the malignancy before it can spread further. This decisive action positions him not merely as the heir, but as the active defender of the institution, earning the deep respect of the palace machine and the senior political establishment. The long-term impact on the British monarchy is one of crucial streamlining and focus. The decision formalizes a clear demarcation. The Crown is comprised solely of its working members. By drawing this sharp, irreversible line, William has protected the royal family from being perpetually held hostage by the unpredictable media strategies of one estranged couple. The resources previously diverted to managing the Sussex noise, including communication teams, legal counsel, and security assessments, can now be redirected entirely toward Charles's goals and William's future-facing initiatives. This move directly addresses the core vulnerability that the Foreign Office had identified: ambiguity. The statement delivers maximum institutional clarity. Global partners, politicians, and the public can now operate with the unambiguous understanding that the royal family, as an institution, has one voice and one agenda championed by King Charles and his direct heir. This restoration of structural integrity is vital for maintaining the monarchy's role in Commonwealth affairs and international diplomacy. The confirmation also serves as a subtle yet potent message to Prince Harry himself. By closing the door on Meghan's future within the institution, William also defined the limits of his brother's influence. The finality of the statement implies that the crisis was deemed severe enough to prioritize institutional duty over any remaining fraternal sentiment. This hard boundary is designed to enforce distance and prevent any lingering possibility of the couple leveraging their former status for future media narratives centered on a potential return or reconciliation. Prince William's definitive statement had immediate and devastating ramifications for the Sussex's commercial brand in the United States. The American entertainment and media industry, which has always valued the royal titles as high-value intellectual property, was now forced to confront a cold, irreversible reality. That asset had been publicly and permanently devalued. The core appeal of Meghan and Harry in the U.S. market has always resided in their unique position as both insiders and outsiders. They possessed the ability to deliver intimate stories, internal insights, and family drama, while maintaining a certain proximity to the institution. But the No Pathway for Return proclamation irrevocably stripped them of their insider status. They are now, legally and institutionally, solely celebrities, deprived of the political power to create diplomatic ambiguity and high-stakes palace news. This shift instantly affected their major commercial deals. For the production houses, networks, and streaming platforms that signed multi-year contracts with the couple, the valuation of those contracts was intrinsically tied to their exclusive access to and commentary on the royal drama. When William definitively stated that the door was sealed, he drastically reduced the couple's ability to generate breaking news content related to the family in the future. Commercial partners now face a tough reassessment. Is the investment in the Sussex brand still justifiable when they are merely storytellers with no official link to the crown? Another clear consequence is the shift in media focus. The mainstream American press, which had often given the couple the benefit of the doubt, is now operating under immense pressure from the British palace. Major news organizations, which rely on Kensington Palace for official confirmation regarding Charles and William, must exercise extreme caution when reporting on the Sussexes. William's personal conclusive statement is a strong signal to editors. The official period of the Sussexes representing the crown is over. Any organization that continues to assign them a royal role will be seen as contradicting the future sovereign's public decree. This leads to the establishment of a non-negotiable media boundary. Senior, legitimate media channels, which value accuracy and their relationship with the palace, will steer clear of Sussex speculation. Conversely, only the pure entertainment and tabloid outlets will continue to heavily feature them. William has succeeded in segmenting the news cycle, allowing the crown to focus on serious matters while the personal drama is relegated firmly to the entertainment sphere. Strategically, this is a clear win for the stability of the monarchy. The finality of the statement delivered by Prince William was not an act of revenge. It was an act of institutional survival. It was the clearest expression yet of William's core vision for the monarchy he will one day lead. A slimmed-down, focused, and unyielding institution defined by duty, clarity, and an absolute intolerance for internal destabilization. He has learned the brutal lessons of the past decade that in the modern media landscape, ambiguity is weakness, and silence can be misconstrued as assent. By publicly sealing the door on Meghan's return, William has engineered a deliberate institutional resurrection. This resurrection is defined by three key elements: the restoration of trust. The years of internal conflict had chipped away at public trust, creating a sense that the royal family was beholden to personal drama. William's decisive action restores the perception that the monarchy is a serious political and state body, prioritizing its mission over personal comfort. the protection of the core. The definitive split ensures that the core working family, Charles, William, and Catherine, can operate without distraction. William has created a clear perimeter, ensuring that every public engagement and charitable initiative is focused on service, not on managing the fallout from California. The definition of modern leadership. William has defined his leadership not through tradition, but through strategic decisiveness. He has shown the world that he is willing to make the hard choices, sacrificing sentimentality for stability, an attribute that reassures both his father, the king, and the political establishment in Westminster. The statement, "There will be no pathway for return," thus serves as William's manifesto for the future. It declares that the era of managing constant external threats and internal divisions is over. The focus is now solely on continuity, duty, and service. This firm boundary is a prerequisite for Charles's reign to be seen as stable, and for William's future to be viewed as secure. Ultimately, the irreversible truth revealed today is not just about Meghan Markle. It is about the sovereignty of the crown. William's verdict confirms that the British monarchy is willing to aggressively defend its own boundaries against any threat, internal or external, that compromises its stability and its capacity to serve the nation. The drama may continue in Hollywood, but at Kensington Palace, the royal future has been definitively settled, and the silence that follows is the sound of institutional order being restored.